Good afternoon. This is Assemblywoman Petrie-Norris. So pleased that you could join us for today's town hall. We're talking about powering California's clean energy future. You know, sometimes the world today can feel like we are living through a disaster movie. Raging wildfires, drought-ravaged crops, thousand-year floods. Certainly does feel like Mother Nature has been trying to send us a message to wake up and smell the science. And the truth is we've been hitting the snooze button on that wake-up call for far too long. We recognize that we must act now to confront the existential threat of climate change. And California has and will continue to be a global leader in this all-important fight. And California is leading the nation toward 100% clean energy future. So really excited to be joined today by a terrific group of panelists to talk about California's and America's clean energy future. We are joined today by Congressman Mike Levin, by David Hochschild, the chair of the California Energy Commission, and by Caroline Choi, the Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs at Edison International. Thank you all for being here, for joining us. Before we got started, I was saying I'm so looking forward to this conversation. Before we jump into that discussion, love to just take a few minutes for folks to introduce themselves to everyone watching at home. Congressman Levin, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Assembly Member. It's great to be with you, and I'm honored to be on with the chairman and with Caroline, and I hope we have a great discussion. For those that don't know me, I am the representative for California's 49th District, which encompasses South Orange County and Northern San Diego County, with Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton right in between. Before I was elected to Congress, I was a clean energy advocate. I worked for a number of years advancing climate and environmental policies. So I'm really eager to have this discussion this afternoon. And when I decided to run for Congress, I decided to make addressing the climate crisis one of the central reasons I was running. And I'm very honored that in Congress, I sit on the Select Committee for the Climate Crisis, as well as the House Natural Resources Committee and the subcommittees for Water, Oceans and Wildlife, and Energy and Mineral Resources. On the Select Committee for the Climate Crisis, last year we released a 500-page plan, a blueprint for climate action. You can see it at climatecrisis.house.gov. And if you don't feel like reading all 500 pages, which is perfectly understandable, there's like a 4-page summary. And if that's too much, there's like a 1-page summary. So hopefully everybody can check it out. But in a nutshell, it is a foundation for a lot of what we're seeing now from President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. And we're very eager to work with them to build back better, to get the economy back to full employment, to eradicate COVID-19, but also to accelerate the sustainable future that we all want to see, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to create great clean energy jobs in the process. The plan that we released includes specific proposals that will set the United States on a path to achieve net zero carbon pollution by 2050, save over 60,000 lives per year due to reduced air pollution, and save nearly $8 trillion by 2050. And that doesn't even include additional energy savings. In addition to the work on the Select Committee, as I mentioned, I'm on the House Natural Resources Committee, and I've been very honored to work to fight against offshore drilling along the California coast. Assembly Member, if your constituents are like mine, I can't find a single one that actually wants to see more drilling off the California coast, so much more to come in that regard. And we are also working to expand water resiliency and try to figure out how we're going to drought-proof the state of California and our long-term water supply. So with that, I'm excited to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Congressman, and we are really grateful for your leadership, really and truly. Chairman Hochschild, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Assemblywoman, for bringing us together. Congressman, for your terrific work. David Hochschild. I chair the California Energy Commission. We're a 700-person state agency working to get the state of California to 100% clean energy. So we do that through new building codes, such as the one we did last cycle, mandating solar on every new home in California, to research and development. We give out about $150 million for clean energy innovation, energy storage, microgrids around the state, And our biggest focus right now is on transportation electrification. There's $1 billion in the governor's budget for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And we want to make California, lead the nation. I would say, the good news is that we are making a lot of progress, and alternative energy is now the wrong word to describe renewables. That's really what you use to describe fossil. We got 63% of our electricity from carbon-free sources last year in California. And because California, went big on this 100% clean energy goal, that is now spread to 17 states, and it's in Joe Biden's energy platform as the goal of the country. And so we have an incredible role to play as an incubator of new industries, including now electric vehicles. Our #1 export from the state of California last year was electric vehicles. Our largest manufacturing operation in the state today is Tesla, one of 38 companies making EVs in California. So I would say one of the main focuses is electrification. Our climate strategy really runs through the grid now, and that includes electrifying rail, vehicles, and the building sector. And so a lot of momentum on that, and happy to get into all that. So thanks for bringing us together today.
Yes, well, as you said, California is an incredible incubator. We are a global leader. The policies that we implement here in California so often do get emulated in other states and indeed on a national level. So I'm very excited to have you join us today. And Caroline Choi, who is the Senior VP of Corporate Affairs at Edison International. Ms. Choi, thank you so much for being here as well.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting me, and it's really an honor to be here with Congressman Levin and Chairman Hochschild and with you to talk about such an exciting issue for the state and certainly for your districts. As you mentioned, I'm the Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs at both Southern California Edison, the utility, as well as the holding company Edison International. And what does that mean? The team that I have works closely with our local, state, and federal elected officials. So both the Assembly, the Senate, as well as members of Congress, like Congressman Levin, as well as some of the regulatory agencies. As well as some of our stakeholder organizations or business organizations, et cetera. And then we also included in corporate affairs is our corporate communications. So both our internal and external communications and our corporate giving. We contribute about $20 million every year to nonprofits, charitable nonprofits in our service area, really trying to strengthen the community around us and really with a focus on the disadvantaged communities in Southern California. Southern California Edison serves a service area of 50,000 square miles. It's a very geographically diverse service area, from the coastal areas like yours all the way up to the high desert and pockets in between. And it's also, of course, a very diverse population that we serve as well. So working to make sure that when we're communicating to our customers, we're doing it in a way both in English and Spanish and multiple languages to make sure that they're able to digest the information, make it easily understandable. Because what we see is a real opportunity, as both Chairman Hochschild and Congressman Levin mentioned, and you as well, this opportunity around a clean energy future. And we believe that the utility, as an implementer of public policy, can be a real facilitator for customer engagement in that clean energy future through programs that we offer, through partnerships with agencies like the CEC. Just really excited about both what California has been doing and has on its plate to accomplish this year and going forward, as well as, I think, a real excitement that we see great alignment with the federal administration now in Washington. And so an opportunity both with the Congress as well as with the Biden administration, which sees climate change as a climate crisis, as Congressman Levin mentioned. And so, a real commitment to action to address it. And we see great opportunity for the national policy to now align with California policy and drive us forward, because we've lost time in the last 4 years and don't have time to waste. 2030 is right around the corner. 2050 is just beyond that. And a lot of work that has to be done to move us towards that, 100% clean electric future, as well as leveraging that 100% clean electricity in other aspects of the economy, like buildings and transportation that Chairman Hochschild mentioned. So just a real honor to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Well, thank you. And yes, like you said, time is not on our side, and the time to act really and truly is now. Um, just to start us off, broadly speaking, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see California facing as we do build our clean energy future? And I'll go ahead and Chairman, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I would say one of the biggest challenges with the Trump administration, to be honest, on virtually every, I think we had over 100 lawsuits with them on many of the key issues. And I have to say, President Biden coming in and going bold on the solutions that we need has been such a breath of fresh air. Things like offshore wind, which can be deployed, 20, 30 miles offshore where it's out of sight, can be a huge help. And the Biden administration is being very collaborative on these things. Innovation, even the deployment of renewable projects on federal lands. So all that I think is going better. I would say, at a high level, given the events that happened in August last year, where we did have an outage for 4 hours in August. Of course, Texas had an outage that was 500 times worse than that. We're very mindful about electric reliability, and so there's a whole bunch of activity now to shore up our system. We're doing a tenfold increase in energy storage just to ensure that our grid is going to be really reliable. I think that's fundamental. And then cost and affordability, and being very mindful of that. The wildfire liability price tag has added to electric rates, and that's an issue. I think one good thing that happens is that the cost of renewables is coming down. So solar power went from being 50 cents a kilowatt hour 20 years ago to 2 cents a kilowatt hour now, and still is declining. And as we do transportation electrification, we now have about 800,000 electric vehicles in the state. That is diverting money that was going to the oil industry and putting into the electric sector and spreading those fixed costs among more kilowatt hours. And so that's actually a downward force on rates, and another reason why we need to step up. But those are some of the things top of mind, let's say reliability and cost.
And Congressman Levin, your thoughts, the big picture challenges that we're confronting.
Well, I certainly agree with the chairman that it's really nice that California is not getting sued every week by the administration. I think the biggest challenge that we're facing is explaining to the American public that if we make these investments in clean energy and in sustainability, that will actually, in the long run, be creating a whole lot more economic opportunity. And so often we hear about the cost of taking action, like you might be hearing now about a infrastructure package, Build Back Better package that has a price tag of $3 trillion. But what you don't hear is how much it'll cost if we do nothing. And the continued cost of the status quo in terms of the fossil fuel powered economy versus the renewable powered economy. I have a friend up at Stanford, Marshall Burke, who's an economist who's done some work that suggests that if we fail to take action on climate and we just keep the status quo in place, that we're going to cost the American economy around $25 trillion. You got that right, $25 trillion. And as I mentioned before, our select committee on the climate crisis found that it was about an $8 trillion savings to take all the types of actions that we're contemplating. So I think as we transition, obviously we've been focused on the American Rescue Plan around COVID-19, and that's now being rolled out in terms of the direct payments and the unemployment assistance and all the other provisions of that. Eradicating COVID-19 has been top of everyone's mind. But phase 2 is really the Build Back Better recovery effort. And to the extent that it costs in the near term, just explaining to the average American that whatever price we pay, if we fail to take action, if we do nothing, the costs will be far higher. So that's a challenge, because part of it's a messaging challenge, but part of it's also, I think, combating a lot of the misinformation that's out there around climate action. And before the pandemic, I think we saw in California that you can protect the environment and grow the economy in a green and sustainable way. I think we're a success story in that regard, and we shouldn't be afraid to talk about it.
Right, and I think that's so spot on. It's reframing the conversation. It's not just about $1 trillion, multi-trillion-dollar cost. This is a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity as well, and that is certainly going to be important, as you said, as we communicate to the American public and bring people along on this important journey with us. Ms. Choi, your perspective on some of the big picture challenges facing.
Yeah. No disagreement with what's been said already in terms of reliability, certainly cost, as well as the messaging challenge. I do think what we've seen is that change is hard. And what we're talking about doing to create this clean energy economy and really address the climate crisis is significant change. And it's moving away from the way things have always been, to doing things in a new and different way. And that's hard. It's hard to explain it, as Congressman Levin talked about. It's hard to see the benefits right off the bat. And so it is painting that narrative, seeing that what can be accomplished. And California, I think, is a great example of what's already been accomplished, and the benefits of moving towards that clean energy economy has already produced. And so just staying on that path, that really accelerating to really leverage as we move to more and more clean energy, how we leverage that in more parts of the economy. We have to really accelerate that with more transportation electrification, really expanding the building electrification opportunities so that we're able to take advantage of that. And there will be some costs, but there are also, as Congressman Levin noted, the benefits associated with that. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic really is an opportunity to leverage some lessons, because we had to change really quickly as a result of the pandemic. And I'll just give an example for Edison. We announced just over a year ago on a Friday that starting on that following Monday, we'd be going to 2/3 of our workforce working from home, and having to pivot. And I just give a lot of credit to our IT department to making sure that folks had the right equipment, and we did ergonomic checks for people to work at home, and just really focusing on safety and working safely at home. But all these things we did on a dime, and we didn't have prior to COVID-19 a work from home policy, because we didn't want people working from home. We really valued the in-person interactions, that the creativity, the spontaneous conversations that occurred when you're together. But we 2/3 of our workforce has been working from home since March 16th of 2020, with the other third being those essential line workers that are keeping the lights on and doing the work, as David talked about, the work to reduce the risk of wildfire. So the system hardening work and the situational awareness activities and all this stuff that we're investing in to really adapt to the changing climate, because we see a higher wildfire risk that's occurred in California. The point is we adapted quickly. And what are the lessons that we can take from doing something like that with a sense of urgency? That same sense of urgency has to apply here on the climate crisis, and recognize that we were able to do it with something like COVID-19. It's a global issue as well on climate change. And so having that real sense of purpose and that sense of urgency and drive to make the necessary changes to address what we see as a real urgent situation, and building the case, as Congressman Levin said, on those challenges and the opportunities that the challenges do provide.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to pick up Chairman Hochschild on a point you made related to reliability and the challenges around reliability. And I feel like this sometimes comes up from perhaps doubters or naysayers when we talk about the transition to a clean energy future. Folks will say, oh, but we can't do this and still keep the lights on. So as you said, in August, we did have a situation where I think it was things were down for 4 hours. We have experienced rolling blackouts over the past year. I guess I'll start with you, Chairman, and then Ms. Choi, would love your perspective as well. What has been the cause of those rolling blackouts? What do we need to do to ensure there's less of those in the future? And what are we doing to ensure that we are shoring up the reliability of the grid? Oh, you're muted, Chairman.
I think
Wouldn't be a Zoom call.
I think that's the most common sentence of the last year. You're muted.
Yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, we had a record-breaking heat storm across the entire West. The highest reliably recorded temperature in world history occurred in California in August in Death Valley. And that stressed the grid. It stressed the whole state, the whole West. So imports were way down. Air conditioning load went way up. And what we're doing now, I would characterize grid reliability as a 100% solvable problem. Okay, this is something we can get ahead of, and we are getting ahead of it. And it involves not just adding more capacity, which we're doing, and adding more storage, which we're doing very aggressively. As I mentioned, a tenfold increase in energy storage procurement just this year alone, but also becoming much more intelligent about manipulating demand. So energy demand, traditionally in the electric sector, we've thought of demand as a pretty static thing. And so someone comes in, turns on a factory, and the power plant turns on to meet that load. But it turns out a lot of electric load is flexible. And so, when you're operating your devices and charging protocols for electric vehicles, pre-cooling of buildings, there's a huge amount we can do. And the truth is, we've been punching below our weight in that arena, and we're getting a lot more sophisticated and focusing on it very intensely right now. So this whole field of demand response, we've been working actively. We're making a bunch of changes to improve that. And then going forward, I think the electrification of the vehicle fleet presents huge opportunities. We operate an electric school bus program, so we're procuring over 200 electric school buses for the state. Those buses are plugged in the middle of the day when you have extra solar energy. They go do their routes, and they can plug back in, and you can design them so they feed back into the grid when you need it in that later afternoon, early evening peak. There's a bunch of things like that we can do. So it's not a silver bullet solution, it's silver buckshot. There's many things. And the other thing I would say is just getting a lot better communication between all the agencies and between California and our neighboring states. And so this has been a major focus for us the last year.
And Ms. Choi.
Hochschild definitely covered it, and I think the report that the California Independent System Operator, that the Energy Commission, and the Public Utilities Commission put out just recently about the root cause, that's exactly right. This west-wide heat wave really exacerbated the situation, and it was the lack of available resources. We, just as an example, though, we have added a lot of capacity just in this last year, just not even within the last, we have a whole several months to go before August. So at the time in August of 2020, for example, we had SCE had 62 megawatts of energy storage. And by this summer of 2021, we expect to have 990 megawatts of energy storage. So we contracted significant amounts of energy storage that will be available for this summer. So that's just an example. The chairman mentioned demand response. I think we see great opportunity. We had great response in demand response from our customers. Absolutely, last summer. They really stepped up, particularly our business customers who have interruptible load, who had backup generation. We need to incent more demand response for customers to participate. There is, I think, a market for demand response that we see coming. And so that's just another way. We have a smart thermostat program as an example, where customers can earn bill credits for adjusting the thermostat and conserving energy. And so that's just an example of a program where we feel customers can benefit and the grid can benefit. And there's other opportunities like that with demand response. So between the demand response, additional resources that we're bringing onto the system, and not just SCE, but other utilities as well, we think we'll be able to address the situation this summer. But we just never know. I mean, that was just such an anomaly, as the chairman mentioned, just record heat, record temperature setting. And so we'll just have to see, but we are more prepared and focusing on the reliability of the system, because we do see as electricity expands into more parts of the economy, the reliability and the resiliency of the grid is going to be really critical.
Yeah,
more critical.
Yeah. And so Congressman Levin, I know you have been working on the decommissioning of the San Onofre nuclear generating station, which is been the Songs is just outside my district, but it is still a subject that my constituents are deeply, deeply concerned about. I think you put together a task force on the issue. And I believe, Caroline, you've been working on that project as well. Can you just give us a quick update on that? And how's that effort going? What are some milestones that we're looking forward to on that front?
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. The decommissioning is Edison's responsibility, so that Caroline can weigh in on that. But I have been focused on really two things. First is ensuring that there is strong federal oversight of the decommissioning so that it's done safely. And second, and very importantly, is breaking the federal stalemate on nuclear waste nationwide. This is a challenge that we face not only at San Onofre. The fact that we can't move the waste at San Onofre is the symptom of a greater problem, which is that we've got nowhere to move it to. The entire country has nowhere to send nuclear waste from power plants, and that's despite the fact that the federal government committed to having a solution several decades ago. And you're right. After I was sworn in, I started a task force headed by the former head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and by also a retired Navy admiral, was the Navy mayor of San Diego, and a lot of community stakeholders. And we released a 70-page report in the last summer, with more than 30 recommendations. About 8 of those were federal. It's a multifaceted problem. Federal, state, local jurisdiction all have a piece. But one of the recommendations was that we prioritize moving waste from those sites that have a higher seismic risk and a higher population density. Probably won't surprise you to know that San Onofre ranks at the very top of that list. And, so once we find a place, whether it be a consolidated interim storage site or a permanent geologic repository or both, we need to make sure that our waste at Songs is prioritized. Another is to create a new research and development program to make sure that we're coming up with innovative solutions. We have to continue to innovate. And I'm excited that at the end of the last Congress, the authorization, or at the end of last year, rather, the authorization for that program became law. And that's $500 million over 5 years. So I was very excited about that. We also the task force recommended that we require resident inspectors, so on-site inspectors at all times during decommissioning, and language to that effect was included in the fiscal year 21 government funding bill. So I was pleased to see that. We've now met with the new head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and Chris Hansen. I think he's committed to solving the problem. There was just a new Deputy Secretary of Energy, Turk, that was just chosen, and we're going to be meeting with him. One of the challenges, and the last thing I'll say, is that neither the Nuclear Regulatory Commission nor the Department of Energy has given the problem of spent nuclear fuel across the United States the true dedicated consideration that it deserves. And so we hope to work with Senator Feinstein and others potentially to develop a new nuclear waste administration where the efforts would be centralized. So there's a lot. We could have just the whole hour on that, and I don't want to take up your whole hour, but happy to talk more about it anytime.
Yeah, no, and we appreciate everything you are doing on that. And yes, it's a huge challenge, obviously, for our community, and as you said, nationwide. Ms. Choi, anything you would add to that?
Sorry.
You've got
Your dog has a
it.
lot
You've
of
got it.
opinions
You've got a very busy assistant.
nuclear stress.
I think Connie and I both have a A+ record with the Humane Society, so just make sure that we pass that along.
My happy dog being not so happy at the moment. The Congressman really addressed the issue. So we do have the responsibility for the decommissioning, and we have taken that to heart with 3 principles really guiding our efforts: safety, stewardship, and engagement, and continue to move to make progress on the decommissioning. We made some major milestones last year in moving the spent fuel out of the pools and into dry cask storage. As the Congressman mentioned, unfortunately, there is not a facility at the moment where the spent fuel can be moved, but we want to be ready to move it when such a facility exists, whether that is a permanent geological repository or an interim consolidated interim storage facility. One of the things that we just released last week was a strategic plan. North Winds is a third-party report. North Winds did the work, and it talks about potential options for the spent fuel. It does require federal action, as the Congressman mentioned. With the release of those reports, we launched a new coalition, Action for Spent Fuel Solutions Now is the name of the coalition. And the now part is really key because, again, as the Congressman mentioned, it's been decades past the agreed upon date for the federal government to take title to this spent fuel, and not just at San Onofre, but at other plants around the country. And so it's really well past time. We do see progress being made. We're hopeful that this coalition, which we hope to grow with other parties and other entities, this was launched with both Orange and San Diego counties on board. We believe that it can help hopefully push and build momentum and support the Congressman's efforts to get a solution to the spent fuel and action on it as quickly as possible.
That's good to hear that we're making some progress, I think, and like you said, building that momentum. Chairman Hochschild, I want to come back to our conversation about the transition to a greener grid, as it were. I think you said in your opening remarks that right now we're up to 63% renewables in California's energy grid.
62% carbon free. So
okay.
Our definition under statute for renewables does not include large hydro over 30 megawatts and does not include nuclear. But when you add large hydro and nuclear, we're at 63% last year.
Okay.
Generation.
Okay. And so where are we right now in terms of, renewables in that mix, and how do you see that expanding in the future? How quickly are we going to be able to expand that?
Yeah, it's a great story. I mean, the cheapest resources available in California for new energy generation are wind and solar, and we're not done with cost reduction. I would add to that mix offshore wind. So what's happening in offshore wind is really exciting. The costs are coming down rapidly, and California has a big difference with the East Coast. So East Coast, Rhode Island was the first state in the US to deploy offshore wind. And they were relatively small turbines, about 5 megawatts. We're now at 14 megawatt turbine size that GE is making, and there's talk of getting up to 20. That will really help drive down the cost, and these will be installed on floating platforms that are out of sight. And that's one of the main things I'm focused on is trying to get that resource up and going, because the generation profile of offshore wind is very different from wind on land. For one thing, it's a much better resource. Wind turbines on land in California typically spinning 35 to 40% of the hours a day. Offshore wind is closer to 60%. And the generation profile is sort of the perfect yin-yang complement to solar. So it's actually ramping up in the afternoon and evening as solar's going down. So we're way, way behind places like the UK. They have 38 installed offshore wind projects there. So that's definitely an important piece of the puzzle. But continued innovation in all the rest of the renewable technologies is going to keep driving costs down, and energy storage as well. Energy storage costs have come down 90% in the last decade. So that's part of what's made electric vehicles so competitive, and why all these companies are now investing in electric vehicles, and why Tesla's the most valuable car company in the world. But I think there's a really interesting strategy around second life batteries after they've, let's say you've operated an electric car for 8 or 10 years and the battery goes down to 70% of its nameplate rating. Before you even think about recycling or disposal, that battery has a healthy second life as backup energy storage. And so that's one of the things we've been funding, is some pilots of that. And I think that can help us just deal with the intermittency. Again, not all renewable resources are intermittent. We obviously have a healthy geothermal industry in California, and hydro and biomass, but the two cheapest resources are wind and solar, and those don't operate 24 hours a day. So, which is why we have to have this portfolio approach.
Right. And so Congressman Levin, picking up on just how important solar is going to be, we both represent districts with that are blessed with lots of sun. I guess how do you see the role of solar evolving? How do you see solar technologies, new solar technologies coming to market, and particularly new storage technologies? I think that's always been one of the challenges. Kind of what do you see the picture looking like, particularly on the solar side over the next several years?
Well, the first thing I try to do is make sure my colleagues across the country know that the lights are still on in California, and our comparative costs of electricity are in line. And we have the Cal ISO app. I don't know if you all have that, but I have it on my phone right now. 69% of our grid is being served by renewables. It's kind of sunny out, so it's a little bit unfair, but it's always a good percentage. And I love this app. I want to see a dedicated tax credit for utility scale storage, and I think we're going to need, in addition to Edison, I think our state needs are only going to grow with regard to utility scale storage. And depending on the estimates, I hear 10, 15, 20, 25 gigawatts of utility scale storage needed in the years ahead in California alone. So I think as part of this Build Back Better initiative, we want to see a large federal investment in grid modernization. Think about what happened in Texas as an example. And I've spoken to my Republican friends from Texas, my Democratic friends from Texas, to varying degrees. They may or may not believe the federal government needs to weigh in, but things like grid weatherization, grid modernization, these are opportunities not only for great jobs, but also to help to really transform our power grid so that we can enable the solar. And then the other thing I'll say is that solar, I want to see it built in America. I was on with a number of solar developers this morning, and I like to figure out how Build Back Better can help us be globally competitive. One company, I won't tell you which company, I don't want to out them here, but they just broke off their manufacturing to overseas. And I wanted to kind of dig into that and understand why. And my question to them is, how can Congress work to help other companies not have to make that same decision? How can we incentivize that manufacturing base to remain here in the United States? My hope is that we can create that right incentive structure, and that this Build Back Better framework can be the way we do it. But
Congressman, if I could just respond to that. One thing for your awareness, Governor Newsom has doubled the budget for, it's called the CAFA tax credit, which is a manufacturing tax credit for clean energy manufacturing in California, from 100 million. I'm on that board, and it's the proposal to double it this year, and that was instrumental, for example, in the Tesla factory. A lot of that equipment got the sales tax credit. So that's one thing we can do to help. But I just want to say, thunderous agreement to your point. I think with additional automation, we can absolutely do it. And I just visited a new lithium-ion battery factory in Fremont the other week that just raised a couple $100 million, and we're going to build it in the Philippines. Decided to bring it back here. And I think one other thing that helps is proximity to market, because we're going to be deploying so much of this stuff. It will also reduce their logistics costs.
Well, and you brought up before how our largest manufacturing export is electric vehicles. There's no reason we can't lead on solar and storage and other forms of renewable generation the way that we have led on EVs. And we're in a fight to maintain our competitive advantage on EVs as well. So the right mix of federal and state incentives are really key. And on the EVs, by the way, we're going to make sure, I know Leader Schumer, Senate Leader Schumer has a proposal where it's a rebate, new federal rebate program for EV purchases, but it's specifically geared to ensuring that the end customer gets a bigger rebate for domestically manufactured EVs. So things like that are very much in the mix. And if you have good ideas, send them our way.
Well, and
just really quickly to that point, one other thing that may be of interest for all of you is this new vision. We have the Lithium Valley idea, which is to do a Silicon Valley in Southern California in the Salton Sea area, because if you think about lithium is really the oil of the clean energy future, and the size of California's lithium resource is incredible. So at scale, it is projected to supply as much as 40% of the global market. And so with the legislature's direction and the governor's direction, we've set up this Lithium Valley Commission just last month, which is meeting monthly to bring all the stakeholders together and get that ecosystem going, because we have the largest market in the country for electric vehicles and energy storage, and we have the raw material, but we need to track back the rest of that ecosystem, cathode manufacturing and so forth. And so I think that's a big opportunity. And we should think about, should there be a strategic lithium reserve like we have for petroleum, right? It's time to ask those questions.
And I had not heard that line that lithium is the oil of the clean energy future, but I like that one. I might reuse that. But I mean, to Congressman Levin, your point, and Chairman, your point. Yes, we absolutely want this technology, these emerging technologies built in America. We want them built here in California. And I do think that California has many of the ingredients to become increasingly a hub for these green emerging technologies. But we also, I think, have to be very intentional about it. And so, Chairman, I'm glad to see it that you're thinking through how do we make sure that we build that ecosystem here, because it's very easy. We know that California can be a challenge. We've seen too many manufacturing jobs leave California. As we're building these new manufacturing jobs, we really, really want them here in the Golden State.
Well, and let me just add on that, Assemblywoman, that the context of workforce development, because I do think California really is thinking about that. We had a meeting just a couple of weeks ago with Labor Secretary Sue talking about some of their programs. Specifically, at that time, it was around cybersecurity and a program they're building there in the Inland Empire, because one of the areas that we do see is a real need for cyber jobs, and so many cyber jobs being unfilled or taking so much time to fill them because they don't have enough accredited people to come into the workforce. So that's one, but they also already have programs already that they're developing for that future workforce that can do the work on an EV, for example, right? So because a mechanic for an EV is very different than a mechanic that's needed on a gas-fueled vehicle. So those are the kinds of things. And even Edison, we're investing in nonprofits who are building curriculums and doing the training on whether it's from rooftop solar installations to a curriculum around EVs, because we do want to make sure that we're investing in the community and building the jobs of the future and to help with that whole clean energy economic change. And so the whole Build Back Better really comes down to having those jobs and also having the trained workforce to take advantage of it. And we see a real opportunity in California.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. Working together, we can capitalize on that opportunity. It's exciting.
I'm just going to add one final piece of the puzzle I think that can be really helpful is the Department of Energy Loan Guarantee Program. They have $46 billion in loan authority that was basically unused during the Trump era and not really much under the Obama era. And if you'll recall, Tesla got a $500 million loan from the DOE loan program, paid it back early in its entirety. And the new director of that program really wants to push this money out. And I think, supporting that going out with a focus on manufacturing could be really helpful, Congressman. I think that's a big opportunity there.
Well, Jigar Shah is the man for it. He's gonna make sure that that money is used well.
Yes, I agree.
Now, I want to pick up on I don't remember who we started to talk a little bit about zero emission vehicles. So I want to make sure that we have a chance to touch on that before we have to wrap up. So I think, as we all know, transportation accounts for more than 50% of California's greenhouse gas emissions. I'm guessing most folks watching from home know that in September, Governor Newsom issued an executive order that by 2035, all new cars and passenger trucks sold here in California would be zero emission vehicles. And as I think you noted, Chairman, zero emission vehicles are already a key part of California's clean innovation economy and California's second largest global export. Congressman Levin, you recently introduced legislation that would take this national, so that would transition America to zero emission vehicles and expand charging infrastructure. So tell us about that.
So we have the Zero Emission Vehicles Act. We actually introduced it last Congress. We've reintroduced it this Congress. I'm leading it in the House along with my dear friend Joe Neguse from Colorado, and Jeff Merkley is leading it in the Senate. But by and large, it follows the similar line of thought to what Governor Newsom is trying to do in California. It would create a 2035 goal for all new car sales to be zero emission, and in the interim years, it would create a trading mechanism for those manufacturers like Tesla and others that are doing 100% or more than 50%. They could actually sell the credits to the manufacturers that are doing less than 50%, leading up to 2035. What I can tell you is that we're trying very hard to get some sort of big ZEV goal in the Build Back Better recovery plan, along with tens of billions of dollars in necessary infrastructure for EVs, for the fast charging network that we're going to need. And a lot of it will have to do with reconciliation. Not to bore your audience, but the arcane budget reconciliation process and whether or not something passes what's called the Byrd rule, named after Senator Byrd, will probably determine the format of the ZEV provisions. And Senator Schumer, and we're in discussions with him, he has something called Clean Cars for America. What it would do is create a trading or a credit mechanism and a buyback program where you'd actually be able to hand in your keys for your internal combustion car and get a new EV and get a credit, and that credit would be determined based on whether or not that new EV adhered to domestic labor standards, as well as the income of the individual turning in the car. Very interesting idea, and we'll have to see what makes it through the reconciliation process in the coming weeks, assuming, and it's still an assumption that I'm making, that we're going to have to use reconciliation. We're not going to be able to find 10 Senate Republicans on some of the climate-related provisions. I hope we do. We're going to try, but if we don't, we have to be prepared, and that's what we're going to do.
Well, and I think I feel like we're both very blessed to live in communities where recognition of the climate crisis and a desire to confront that head on is bipartisan, and I am hopeful that it becomes a bipartisan issue for the country. It needs to be if we're going to actually win this battle. And it's a shame that it's not. But I feel blessed every day that I represent a community where it really and truly is. It's not a partisan issue.
These policies are popular with many of our Republican constituents. It's some of the Washington Republicans that don't seem to get it, or from maybe some other places in the country where they haven't had the adoption of electric vehicles and are sort of stuck. And hopefully we can lead the way and have great investment in EVs throughout the country.
And so, as you mentioned,
really
a big.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Chairman.
Congressman, I really appreciate your line of thought. If I didn't know you, I would tell you should run for Congress. I love these bold ideas.
Too late, man. I'm down the rabbit hole. Too late.
No, I think one of the messages we need to do a better job getting out is that climate solutions actually represent our economic future. And so if we're not going bold on this, we are going to be losing the race. I mean, just look at what's happened in the auto industry, okay? The companies, it's totally reordered based on how far along you are in electrification of your fleet, right? I mean, so Tesla's more valuable than the next 7 global automakers combined, right? And that's because they're furthest along the curve. Last 6 weeks, GM comes out 100% electric by 2035, Volvo 100% electric by 2030, BMW 50% electric by 2030. Ford will be 100% electric by 2030 in Europe. And there's going to be a lot more announcements. I mean, we're moving that direction. And so the fallacy of opposing this stuff is that, you know, we get stuck with these industries that represent our past and not our future. And I think that's really a messaging challenge.
And so I think we all, though, recognize, again, I guess in the vein of things that are both challenges, but also huge opportunities, we all recognize that infrastructure is a big part of our ability to be successful. And in Governor Newsom's proposed budget, California would invest $1.5 billion in building out charging infrastructure across the state. I know that the number is certainly far higher than that at the federal level, but I guess just help us put in perspective, I guess, the scope of the challenge, and also, frankly, the scope of the opportunity for infrastructure investment and, you know, to put people to work building this out. Caroline, where are we right now in terms of how many zero emission vehicles are on the road right now? How many are going to be on the road in a decade?
David's going to have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in California we have a little over 800,000 vehicles, about 803,000 electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles as in California, and that's just under half of all the electric vehicles in the entire country, right? So we have 1.8 million vehicles across the country. So California is absolutely leading the way in adopting vehicles, and it's through programs that the state has put in place. Tax credits, access to the HOV lanes, now the California Clean Fuel Reward Program, which is a rebate at the point of sale. So now when you go to a dealership and you get it right there when you buy the vehicle versus having to wait for it and buying it first and then filing later to get that rebate. So it's things like that that have really driven, no pun intended, the sales, plus more models becoming available. So really meeting a broader spectrum of buyers and the needs that they have. I'm the chair of Veloz, a nonprofit that really helps to raise awareness around electric vehicles. Chairman Hochschild is actually the chair of the Public Policy Committee of Veloz, and you know, I think it's a great organization that's really helped, like I said, to bring awareness of EVs, of the benefits of electric vehicles, about the ways that they can meet a number of needs. It's not just about the environment. It's not just about clean. It's, you know, quiet. It's safety. It's durability. It's all these things. You know,
fast, Carolyn, fast.
Exactly. So all these things that meets different needs and desires of buyers, and showing the different models that are available out there for purchase or lease. California also has great programs for the secondary market to really bring the EVs to a more modest income family or household. I think that's another place that we really have great opportunities, and there's legislation at the federal level to do the same thing, to expand that opportunity across the country. So no, Chairman Hochschild, you probably have more to offer there. But
no, I just want to say Caroline's been doing a fantastic job as really a thought leader in this space. And I think one exciting thing to me is the political coalition that can be assembled here. You have utilities, you have labor, you have low-income communities who suffer from some of the air pollution that we have today, environmental community, the innovation community, all coming together. The challenge with infrastructure is this: you buy a phone, and you never worry about where am I going to get electricity to power my phone. Right? Electricity is ubiquitous in our homes, and we're not there yet with electric vehicles, and that now is one of the main constraints. People need to know if they buy a car, they can drive to another city, they can get where they need to go, and not have to worry about charging. So this is really the imperative behind this accelerated push on electric vehicle charging that we're trying to do, and the governor is really passionate about it, because to make this transition go, there's an adoption curve of electric vehicles, and there's these early zealots. I mean, I think probably all of us in this Zoom are in that category, but we're sort of through that now, and we're into the mainstream adoption, and you really have to have you know, infrastructure everywhere, and charging needs to be something that nobody ever worries about. And it can be. It's just a matter of getting this infrastructure deployed. The nice thing about this is jobs we can create right away. It's infrastructure we can put in right away. It's not complicated. This is not rocket science. Putting in a charger is simple. And there's been some evolution in the charging technologies. They now have a 350 kW charger, you can charge 100 miles of range in 5 minutes or 200 miles range in 10 minutes. That technology is out there. We'll be funding some of that, as well as much lower cost level 1, level 2 charging, and charging that's specifically designed to support rideshare. So Uber and Lyft drivers are typically driving 5 times as much as a typical driver. And so electric vehicle does a lot more good in terms of avoided emissions in their hands, but we need to have charging infrastructure that supports that that segment.
Yes, what cars does everyone drive? I'm curious. A few years ago, I got a little Fiat little 500e, which still brings me a lot of joy. It's a little orange one. Doesn't go very far, but I've realized I'm not actually that susceptible to range anxiety. I'm
That's great. Red Chevy Bolt.
okay.
We have 2 electric cars. I have a 2014 Chevy Volt with a V, which I still love. I don't hardly drive now. I go to the airport and back is about it.
Right.
My wife has the Model 3 Tesla, which is red and fast.
My husband has the exact same car. Model 3
right?
red. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
No,
right.
no speeding tickets. No speeding tickets.
Ms. Choi.
I have a Hyundai Kona, black. It's a little SUV.
Cool.
Excellent.
Great. 300
well,
miles of range.
So we only actually have 5 minutes left. So I want to sort of do closing and wrap up comments, but I also want to just pose one last question if folks can kind of touch on that as you close. I think we recognize that as we're transitioning from fossil fuels to clean energy, we've got to ensure that we're creating good, high quality jobs in the clean energy sector as well. So I guess as you're leaving us with your parting thoughts, if you could also just wrap in your thoughts on how do we see that evolution of green energy jobs, and how do we ensure together, collectively as policymakers, as industry partners, that we are creating good, high quality jobs and uplifting communities as we're making this transition. Congressman, I'll start with you.
Well, this is an extraordinary, important time in the evolution of our sustainable future right now. This is the crossroads. We're either going to get this done in the next couple of years with the Build Back Better infrastructure plan. We're going to create millions of clean energy jobs. We're going to dramatically decarbonize transportation, how we move people, how we move goods. We're going to build much more efficient buildings. We're going to revolutionize the way we grow food with regenerative agriculture. And we're going to have a modern, distributed, much lower carbon grid to do it all. And we're going to do everything we possibly can with whatever processes, in Congress, whether it's reconciliation or who knows what. We're going to throw everything we can at this over the next 18 months. And I know that not only is it the right thing to do for our environment, but it's the right thing to do for our economy and the right thing to do for our global competitiveness. As we look back at the, hopefully at this decade of so many challenges, when the United States has been challenged as perhaps never in our history, or certainly at very infrequent moments in our history, this is our time to meet the moment. And we can do it. In addition to, as I've said, eradicating this pandemic, we can do it by creating the clean energy jobs of the future and protecting our climate from the existential threat that we're facing. So the stakes are huge. We need great partners. I'm really honored to have great partners like you and like the chairman and Caroline to advance a better world for our kids, our grandkids, and future generations. So thank you so much for your leadership in Sacramento. And we'll be looking forward to working with you.
Well, and thank you so much for your leadership and for fighting for all of us on these really critical challenges and issues. It's exciting to see what we're doing, and I'm feeling incredibly optimistic about what we're going to be able to achieve both at a state and federal level in the months and years ahead. Ms. Choi, parting thoughts.
Agree with everything the Congressman said. It's really a great time. It's the best time, I think, to be in the electric utility business. What we're doing is really shaping the future, and it's just, like I said, a great, exciting time to be here. I think one thing I'll just add is, one of the things that we really are focused on at Edison is in promoting a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce. One of the things that we're launching this year, we announced it in August of last year, we've had a long time Edison scholarship focusing on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, rising high school seniors that are going on to a four-year degree in a STEM field. One of the things that we're launching later this year is a scholarship, a line worker scholarship, to really increase diversity in the skilled trades, particularly for Edison, the line worker skilled trade. And so it's a scholarship that we're going to push out this year. It's a pilot, a four-year pilot, and focusing in those first couple years around the Black community and trying to get more Black participants in the line worker skilled trade. So we're really excited about it. More information will be forthcoming. I look forward to sharing it with you and others. It's, I think, a really exciting program. We're partnering with Scholarship America, who will be the scholarship administrator. They administer our other scholarship, the STEM scholarship. And also partnering with Brotherhood Crusade to provide wraparound services, because we really want to make sure we have a robust applicant pool to pull from, and want to make sure that if it's childcare or transportation or other services that are an impediment to joining the company or going to school to get this line worker certificate, that we're able to address that and overcome those hurdles. So really excited about this opportunity.
That sounds very exciting, and we'd love to partner with you to roll that out.
Great.
But thank you. Chairman, parting thoughts.
Well, first of all, thank you, Assemblywoman, for bringing us together and for all your vision and commitment, and Congressman Levin for your incredible work, and Caroline as a leader in the private sector and utilities. I always get recharged from conversations like this, so they just give me hope. I think it's really important to remember we have a really inspiring history in California on these issues. And we forget, the global solar industry actually began in California. First utility scale solar projects in the world were deployed here outside of Sacramento. First utility scale wind projects in Altamont Pass began in California. The electric vehicle industry globally began here. Really energy efficiency codes and standards, that was all born here. And so now we got to just take this stuff mainstream. And I remember when I got into the clean energy space about 20 years ago, I was in DC, and I snuck into a coal industry conference, which was going on. So I was just curious to see what these guys had to say. And I sat in the back and I saw this guy put up, a coal industry executive put up a slide, showing the next 100 years of energy in the United States. And renewables were just this little sliver, and the rest was all coal. And he said, we got enough coal to power this country for 1,000 years, and all this stuff is just hot air about renewables. Well, what's happened? Coal went from 52% of our electric portfolio a decade ago. It's less than 20% now, falling. And I just saw one report will be completely off of coal in the next 10 years. And so, conventional wisdom changes. And I think similarly, on the positive side, this vision of 100% clean energy has really caught fire. It's only been 2 years since that law went into effect in California, and that's in statute in 17 states, and it's now the country's energy platform under President Biden. And so I just feel this is a moment that really calls for boldness. And I have loved how President Biden and the Congress are moving quickly and boldly. I think that will prove to be an incredibly prescient decision. But I think the final thing I would say is I just think at the end of the day, we can't have environment repair without democracy repair. And it really requires all of us to be mindful and to be engaged on these things like, the right to vote in these things, because that, when I think about threats to our success, that's very much front and center of my mind. Anyway, I just want to thank you for bringing us together. Loved the discussion.
Well, yeah, and thank you all for joining us. Like you, Chairman, I get energy, I get hope, and inspiration from conversations like this. So thank you all for joining us. As we've all said, we need to act urgently, and we're very encouraged by the leadership that we now have in the White House to tackle the climate crisis, which really is the fundamental challenge facing our generation. So thank you all for the role that you are playing in this all-important fight. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon, and be safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.